And actually, I think I'll join you. So in talking to your crucifer this morning, I asked him, you guys don't have a deacon anymore. They've been decommissioned. And said, so how does Kirk do this? Because I've always, for years, have been nervous about pretending to look like a deacon. I mean, seriously, my attitude is, how dare I? I mean, it is not my place. So when I was at St. Peter's, instead of doing the procession, I would stay at the lectern to read the gospel. Because guess what, folks? I'm not a deacon, so I'm not going to. Anyway, so I was a little nervous. Just want you to know. But survived it. No bolt of lightning yet. So this past couple of years has been a time of sort of ongoing grief, starting with the death of my spiritual director, who I was with for 37 years. He died December of 2022, and then Marietta's mother died that Thanksgiving, and then this past June, my father, right after he celebrated his 94th birthday, suffered a massive stroke, and God bless him, 48 hours later, he was gone. And then a dear friend of mine, an old-timer in Carson City, who I had breakfast with for 3 decades. Every Tuesday morning, we'd have breakfast. Ken died. And then the capper, just in the last couple of weeks, was... Oh, God. Give me a second. The Right Reverend Dabney Smith, who was retired of Southwest Florida, and his death just a couple weeks ago, I think, triggered all these other deaths, all this other grief, which has been kind of floating the last couple of years. But boy, here he comes, and the reason for that has been that Bishop Dabney was my wife's mentor. He was her champion. He was her first commission in the ecclesiastical arts, what she called holy hardware. She designed and created and made his crozier out of silver and enamel and mahogany. Gorgeous piece. She'd never done anything like that before, and he believed in her. And he championed her work from that moment on. This was 15, 18 years ago, whenever. Ever since. And he looked out for her, and as she and I got to know each other, and traveling to Florida to propose to her under the very direct supervision of Bishop Dan and Linda Edwards, because they both realized that I was clueless how to do this. So I had very strict instructions. You do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you say that, and then... But as I was heading to Florida, I get a message from Marietta who says, oh, Bishop Dabney and Mary Wallace, they want to take us out to dinner. I thought, here it comes. And sure enough, I get to Florida, get settled. Bishop Dabney and Mary Wallace invite us over to their house, and he made a point of showing me the crozier, which he brought from a back room of the house into the living room in a gun case. He enjoyed that moment. And then we go out to dinner, sitting around a round table, and Marietta and Mary Wallace, who'd known each other for years, they're having their conversation, and Bishop Dabney turns to me and he says, "I have a few questions for you." And he proceeded very gently and lovingly, but very clearly, asked me a whole bunch of questions. And I had the voice of my spiritual director in the back of my head going, "You might consider telling him the truth." So while we're sitting at the table, I considered it. But he made it very clear that he was watching out for her. I mean, he took on the role he did what a good father would do. I mean, and she hadn't had a father since she was a teen. Her dad died drunk in her late teens, and so she had nothing like this in her life until Bishop Dabney came along. And it was wonderful what he did. And at the end of dinner, and she was clueless. She didn't have a clue what was going on because she and Mary Wall, they were having their own conversation. And by the end of dinner, we step out into the parking lot to go our separate ways, and Bishop Dabney takes me off to the side and he said, "I just want you to know that we're okay with this." And he made it very clear that this was the Episcopal we. And unbeknownst to me, until I got back home after finally proposing to her, I get a call from diocesan offices. Bishop Dan says, "You know he called me." And here's the thing, and I think why it's hitting so hard. He looked out for my wife. He took care of her. He mentored her in a way that she'd never had before. And he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful bishop. And every time I was in Florida doing whatever I was doing, and I'd go by diocesan office, and of course his staff would stonewall me because they didn't know me from Adam, but I'd hear his voice from the back saying, "If that's Marietta's wife, tell him to get his fanny back here." And as I'm walking into his office, his first question, always and everywhere, was, "How is our Marietta? How is she doing?" He cherished her. And so this one's, it's hit us hard. And it turns out his services are tomorrow in Orlando. We had hoped to go and can't because Tuesday we have to be in Santa Barbara for a niece's wedding. So we're gonna live stream it because this one's important to us. And that was kind of the capper for these last couple of years. All these moments of grief, and then of course the retirement, which it turns out I was so ready to retire. I mean, I'm not one of these old-timers who's going, "Oh my God, I miss an altar, I gotta have an altar." It's like, nope. I'm good. I'm real good. Which I suppose brings me to the gospel reading. Those of you who've been around the block a time or two know that the reason that this story in the Gospel of Mark is placed at this particular time of year is because it's supposed to be all about stewardship. And if you were really paying attention to the story, or no, let me rephrase that. If you were partially paying attention to the story, you would be feeling guilty right about now because she gives it all and you haven't. So cough it up, people. Right? I mean, isn't that how stewardship works? Is that how you guys do it here? And guess what? That's not what this story is about at all. Not even close. And so, in an odd sort of way, the church has done us a bit of a disservice by pigeonholing the story, because what's really going on is Jesus makes reference to these scribes. guys who strut around in robes. Yeah. Who, under the guise of their claimed power and authority, use people and abuse people and then pray out loud. So, we're good to go, right? And they use their power and their position of authority to justify whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it, in whatever fashion suits their fancy. Misuse of power and authority. And so, with that reference in mind, when Jesus turns and sort of draws the attention of his disciples to this widow, in effect, and here's where my imagination goes with the story, he draws everyone's attention to her and says, "Oh my God, look at that." And it just so happens that she is among a great many people in these stories, in the gospel tradition, in the Hebrew scriptures, people who have no status, no claim to power or any kind of authority, and in some instances they're kind of nobodies. And Jesus consistently draws his friends' attention to folk like that, saying, "Oh my God." And I think to myself, he's trying to pull a fast one, isn't he? And it turns out he is. The deep structure of this story is that everyone, including, and in his view of things, in particular, those who have no status, those who have no power, no authority, no claim to anything, those who might be considered by everyone else as nobodies, are the image of the presence of God, what in other Gospels is referred to as the kingdom of God. Oh, look. So, this last year, I've come as close as I can recall, at least in the last 40 years, of becoming a nobody. I mean, I don't have the status I used to have. I'm not the rector of St. Peter's anymore. I'm not the dean of the mission district. I'm not the president of the standing committee anymore. I've been laying pretty low to the point where about a week ago, I was in the condiment aisle at Walmart trying desperately to remember what Marietta told me to get. It wasn't coming to me. And a couple of former parishioners walk right by, and I just watch them. And about a couple of steps past, the both of them do a double take, they spin on their heels, they do a 180, come back and say, "Oh my God!" To which I had the opportunity to use one of my favorite lines. "No, only his humble servant." It's one of my faves. I don't know where I got it, but I've been doing it for years. And they just, they're like, "What?" And they said, "We didn't even recognize you." And I said, "Thank you." And meant it. So here's a weird idea. Here's a challenge for us today. Imagine during the peace, which you're going to pass, right? I haven't looked ahead. We're going to do the peace, right? Okay, good. Imagine if we were to, as we encounter one another with, a handshake or a hug or a nod or the peace sign or whatever it is, to say to one another, "Oh my God," or depending on who it is, "Oh my God." And then, you know how it is. It's, some moments and some relationships are better than others. We work with what we got. And then imagine extending this little experiment, if you will. And this isn't, I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I haven't tried. So let me just put it out there. Go home from here and stand in front of the mirror and say the same thing. "Oh my God." And see if that tweaks us any, if that sort of, shifts our attention a bit, because that's what's happening. That's what's really happening in this story. Jesus is drawing everyone's attention to a nobody and saying, "Oh my God, look, oh my God." And I'm not making this up. This is deep Eastern Orthodox theology. It's called theosis. And in the Eastern Church, and it's been this way for centuries, that everyone is invited to experience union with God, with the divine. And one of the ways they do that is to see the divine in everyone and everything around them. It's Orthodox Christianity. And it's kind of cool. The West lost out on this wonderful piece. I hope at some point we reclaim it. Today's a good day to start. To experience union with God by seeing God in everyone and everything. And having said, imagine seeing God in all creation, that might actually change over time. That might change our relationship to the earth. Do you think? I mean, I hear so much, we see so much, I hear myself saying it. "Oh my God, we got to save the earth, we got to save the planet, we got to save the earth, global warming, we got to save the..." It's like, wait a minute, give me a minute here. I can't even save myself. I can't change myself. I can't screw this thing around to make it better. The only thing I've got to bring to the equation is to give up, to surrender, to turn my will and my life over to God. And if we were to see God in all creation and in all people, it might change us for the better. It might put us in a position to take care of one another better. And then if we were to take up the challenge when we get home, and not just once, but try it a couple of times, because when I started this years ago, I kind of choked on it. I had a little trouble with standing in front of the mirror and saying, oh my God. I was like, "Oh my God." Right? But with a little bit of practice, it's like, oh my God. We are images of the divine. We are invited to be in union with the divine and with God. So are you willing? Are you willing to give it a shot? Say, "Oh my God," and have some fun with it. I mean, oh my God. Ugh. And then imagine it as a discipline in our lives. There's a There's a prayer that I've used for years that I've really grown to love. And, like with all prayers, it can become rote and, not engaging and not even thinking about it. But I've tried in this last year to be very intentional about this particular prayer every morning. And it goes like this: God, I offer myself to you to build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, because I can't. Just take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, your way of life. May I do your will always. I mean, this is the life that you and I are invited to live, to see God in each other. So let me start. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.